Hi, my name is Ensign Kenneth Brewer. Welcome to the Noaa Aircraft Operations Center in Lakeland, Florida. Today you'll be guided on a virtual tour. You'll be able to meet our pilots, meteorologists, and maintainers that help keep normal operations here at AOC running. You'll also be able to see our aircraft and tour our facility. But first, let's hear a welcome from our commanding officer, Commander Chris Sloan.
Hello, I'm Commander Chris Sloan, the commanding officer of the Noaa Aircraft Operations Center in Lakeland, Florida. I'm glad you are able to join us for this virtual tour. The facility we call home opened in the summer of 2017. Constructed in only 6 months, it was purposefully built to support our fleet of highly specialized research aircraft. It also serves as an office for our NOAA Corps officers and civilian employees. Here, our team works together to maintain and upgrade our aircraft, plan scientific research missions, and fly through some of the most challenging environments our planet has to offer. We are the scientists and meteorologists on the cutting edge of weather and climate research. We are the engineers that push the boundaries of experimental instrumentation. We are the mechanics and technicians that ensure our fleet of aircraft and their highly specialized equipment are ready at a moment's notice. And we are the pilots and navigators trained to fly in any environment, from the snow-peaked mountains of Alaska or through the eye of a hurricane. The missions we support provide critical and timely data for researchers, first responders, and other government officials to help save lives and protect property, while also monitoring the health of our ecosystems. From all of us here at the Noaa Aircraft Operations Center, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy your tour.
Thank you, Commander. Let's head on inside and have a look. So now we're inside of the Welcome Atrium here at Noaa. You can see it goes up 2 stories. The facility was built and designed in 2016. It was designed by Lundry here in Lakeland, Florida, and then constructed by Register Construction. The construction started in December of 2016 and was completed in under 6 months. It is over 105,000 square feet of office space and hangar space, which allows us not only to keep all 9 of our aircraft, but also house over 100 people on our day-to-day office operations. Now, one of the unique things that I love about AOC is this huge hallway. You can see it goes all the way down the length of the building into the hangar. And you can see the huge double doors at the end and just how wide this hallway is. That's to allow us to bring our engines down here in case they need to be maintained in depth. This is our workout facility here at AOC. Physical fitness is very important, especially when you're doing the missions that we have. This is our project prep room. It allows us to use any of these tools in order to build our wiring harnesses or any of the electrical features that are on our aircraft. Now that you've seen what we have downstairs, let's head upstairs to see what our office spaces look like. This is our flight operations section here at AOC. This is where we make all of our schedules and take care of our aircraft and any of our crews that are on the road. Now we're moving into our admin offices. This is the closest thing we'd have to a type of a quarter deck which you'd find on a ship. We have our Department of Commerce SIL, our NOAA SIL, and our Commission SIL. We're very unique in that we have a mix of civilian and officers here at Noaa AOC. This is our little sit-down area where we invite VIP guests or anyone who's visiting the admin staff. Like we said, Noaa is very unique in that we do have a mix of personnel. So our commanding officer, Commander Chris Sloan, is actually an 05 commander. He's commissioned in the NOAA Corps, whereas our executive officer, or XO, is actually civilian. One of the perks about having a command position is you get your own VIP meeting room. That's where all the important stuff happens. Now let's move into Battleship Row. So now we're moving into Battleship Row. Battleship Row is comprised of many different organizations that are here at Noaa AOC. So we have our finance and budget officers, we have our training, we have safety, and a lot of our meteorologists and engineers are in the back there. We call it Battleship Row because it reminds us of what you would find at somewhere like Pearl Harbor, where you have all of the ships and all of the people lined up in a single row. So now we're moving out of Battleship Row and we're actually coming into one of our common areas. The common areas are designed so that the majority of our people can get together and talk about what's going on. As you can see on the board, we actually had some of our scientists, meteorologists, and pilots planning some of our flights. So you can see some of the entry patterns that they were planning to use inside some of the storms. It's very important to have these areas to bring the team together and have unit cohesion. Inside of our multimedia room, we're allowed to have a larger audience. We can have official ceremonies, weather conferences. Whenever we have tour groups, they'd usually be housed in here. And then we can also have all hands meetings where the entire facility can come together. Now we'll move down to my favorite part of the tour, the hangar deck. Let's go see what Lieutenant Casey Marwine and Lieutenant Connor McGinn are up to.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Casey Marwine of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I am a Twin Otter pilot, and this is one of our 4 Twin Otters. The Twin Otter has 2 PT6 Alpha 27 engines and 620 horsepower, full feathering, full reverse, cruise 135, 140 knots. We have a variety of missions for the Twin Otter, from marine mammal surveys, coastal mapping, snow surveys, air chemistry, and fire X. These windows are specifically designed for our marine mammal studies, and they get a better view, and the scientists can look out the window and they use these tick marks to spot the marine mammal, and then they're able to gauge a distance and give that distance to us pilots and tell us kind of where they want to go, left or right, and we'll go and circle around the animal. And then they'll actually sometimes remove a window in the back and take photos of the marine mammal for identification, and if they're tangled up or if they have injuries and things like that. The Twin Otter has a pretty hefty landing gear. It has a variety of missions outside of what we do, from amphibious, it can have floats to skis, tundra tires, landing on unimproved surfaces, that sort of thing. No, it doesn't have any of that, but it does have the capability to anyway. Back here to the cargo doors and the air scare. We're able to load our cargo. That door will open as well, and just ease of adding equipment, heavy stuff. We can put a auxiliary fuel tank in there for increased range and endurance, and computer racks get secured in there, more seats depending on the crew for the survey. Just really easily adaptable. Back onto the tail section, really large rudder, horizontal stab, and just a lot of controllability, especially slow air speeds. Twin Otter is also rated for icing. It's got the pneumatic de-icer boots on the leading edge of both the wing and the stab there. Onto the other side of the aircraft, you have the other side of the stab, and what we call vortex generators, and just helps the flow of air across the surface, and for, again, controllability. Onto an emergency exit, but also another bubble window for somebody to sit and look out for marine surveys. And there'll be another seat in there, and they also have this belly window, we call it, and there'll be somebody that lays down and looks directly out the bottom. You can get some really good views of marine mammals that way. Not really the most comfortable position to be in for 4 or 5 hours, but it's a position. Now we talked a little bit about the larger control surfaces, the flaps extending all the way to 47.5 degrees, and also the larger aileron. It just gives you go really slow and still have a lot of controllability. The wing fence, and again the pneumatic boots on the wings, and then the wing fence is to help the airflow over the wing for, again, controllability. The props are also heated. Little seats on there. They're just electrically heated for de-icing again. And then kind of a, I don't know, we call it a armor plate almost for ice as it kind of flings off of the prop. And up here is our nose wheel. Right now the tiller is detached for towing. But typically on the ground at slow speeds you can control using a tiller on the left yoke. But typically you're controlling the aircraft on the ground using differential thrust and rudder as you kind of pick up speed. Because it's so large, it gives you quite a bit of control. And thank you for joining me on the tour of the Twin Otter.
Hi again, Lieutenant Connor Regan coming to you on the floor of the Noaa Aircraft Operations Center and in front of one of our Twin Otter aircraft. These aircraft, we have 4 of them. They're multifaceted, they're very diverse, they can support a wide variety of missions that we do. They're specifically made for low-level surveys, so 1,000 feet and below, looking at everything from whales, seals, dolphins, sea lions, sea turtles, flying low to the ground over the snowpack, trying to get an idea how much water quantity is in the snowpack itself. We have 4 of these aircraft. They are deployed all around the country for most of the year. It just so happens we have one of these here to take a look at. Come on over. This aircraft is Canadian made. It is made by de Havilland, Canada. Designed for short takeoff and landing, very stable at low airspeeds. That's why we use it for so many low-level surveys. Let's go on board. Okay, so we're inside of Twin Otter Noaa 46. You can see there's not much room to stand in here, but we can actually put a lot of equipment in the back of this plane. We can rearrange the seats, put a wide variety of science equipment, whether that's chemistry racks for flying through forest fire smoke and collecting information on the air we breathe.
The ability to adapt the interior of the aircraft ensures the success of the mission and that the scientists are able to use the equipment that they need.
This aircraft and all of our Twin Otter aircraft are like big Legos. We can reconfigure them for any sort of project that we're working on. So this project is currently set up for snow survey, so there's only a few seats in the front of the aircraft, but we can actually fit up to 8 scientists in the back of this plane.
So one of the most unique things about our Twin Otter aircraft is that we have these bubble windows on either side. It allows scientists to look down and underneath the aircraft to see the marine mammals swimming at the surface of the ocean with the water below. So now I'm in the cockpit of the Twin Otter Noaa 46, one of my favorite planes. Some interesting things about this plane is that the power levers that's controlling the power to the engines are actually up here. That's kind of characteristics for seaplane designed aircraft like the Twin Otter. We always fly with 2 pilots. Left seat pilot, where I'm sitting right now, is usually flying the plane. The right seat pilot is usually monitoring. And in case we ever forget what aircraft we're in, we always have our Twin Otter mascots to make sure we know where we are. Usually 2 pilots sitting in the plane. Left seat pilot is generally flying. The right seat pilot is generally monitoring what the left seat pilot is doing, making sure we're safe at low level. This plane is, as I said, made for low-level surveys, flying really low to the ground, doing 45-degree banks over whales, and it's quite the aircraft. Always responding to alarms and things, making sure we know what we're doing.
Next is an aircraft normally used for corporate aviation. But here at Noaa, it has been configured for high-altitude atmospheric research, the Gulfstream G4.
Hi, I'm Commander Rebecca Waddington, the current Acting Chief of the Operations Branch at NOAA's Aircraft Operations Center. I'm also an aircraft commander on NOAA's Gulfstream 4, which you see behind me, also known as Gonzo. This is a very unique aircraft. It is normally a business jet, but has been reconfigured to do specialized high-altitude atmospheric research missions. It is the only aircraft of its type to be specifically tasked with hurricane surveillance flights. Now let me tell you a little bit about this plane. The reason we call it Gonzo is because of its elongated nose. The nose is different than any other G4 nose because we have a much stronger radar, a weather radar, inside, and that's used for hurricane research. Now if you follow me to the back of the aircraft, you can see one of our other specially configured parts of this Gulfstream 4. It's called the TDR, which stands for Tail Doppler Radar. We have a similar radar on our P3s. This is a radar that's attached to the tail of the aircraft, hence the name, and it gets a very strong vertical profile of the storm. This helps as we fly in and around convection to really determine the profile and how strong each convective tower is. And you can see it right there sticking out the back of the aircraft. Now the rest of the Gulfstream 4 looks very similar to any other business jet, but inside it's got a completely different picture. Let's take a look. The interior of Noaa's Gulfstream 4 is configured for science instead of luxury. So we actually have 10 seats and 6 different research racks, as you can see right here. The back of the aircraft where we are now is kind of the bread and butter for our research missions. This is a drop sonde stationed. A drop sonde is an instrument that we deploy from the aircraft. Looks like this. It's about the size, a little bigger than a Pringles can. We deploy it from the aircraft through this drop sonde chute right here. So the way it works, we open that up, put the drop sonde in, and then close it back up and release it. It's released because of a differential in atmospheric pressure. So outside, when we're flying at 45,000 feet, the air is very, very thin. But inside the cockpit, it only feels like we're at 6,600 feet. So that difference in pressure will literally suck the drop sonde out of the aircraft. Once it deploys, it unravels this drag chute. This drag chute helps keep the drop sonde going straight down through the atmosphere rather than tumbling end over end. The entire time it's going down, it's collecting different different data for meteorological research. So it's getting temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, and atmospheric pressure. This helps us better understand what the atmosphere is doing and how it's going to impact the hurricane. We always have 2 drop sondes ready at any given drop sonde waypoint in case one fails. That data is vital for the atmospheric models, so we want to make sure that we get good data every time. As we walk towards the front of the aircraft, you can see some of our other scientific research stations on board the G4. Coming up here, you have our tail Doppler radar stations. This is where we have a meteorologist and a technician looking over the radar data that's being collected by the TDR. So we're getting that vertical profile of the storm. And then the very front 2 stations are where our meteorologists sit. These are our flight director stations. Over here on this side, you can see this little gray box is actually a repeater of our nose radar. So the pilots have one sweep of the radar that we can use for the safety of navigation so that we can fly in safe locations. And our meteorologist back here has a second sweep of the radar where they're looking at it from a scientific perspective as well as a safety perspective. Our pilots are in constant communication with the person in this seat, the flight director, so that we can fly into safe areas and keep the crew safe as we're flying in and around a hurricane. Let's go to my favorite spot in the plane, the cockpit. Welcome to the flight station of the Gulfstream 4. This is by far my favorite place to work. And if you look around here, you can see that we have a lot of switches, a lot of circuit breakers. So there's a lot going on up here at all times. Whenever we fly, we have at least 2 pilots. The pilot flying sits here in the left seat where I am, and the pilot monitoring and working the radios is in the right seat. On nighttime hurricane flights, we actually bring an additional 3rd pilot just to help with the circadian rhythm change, and an extra set of eyes is never a bad thing. So this plane is very sophisticated. As I mentioned before, we can fly up to 45,000 feet in altitude, and our max speed is Mach 0.88. Our usual mission is flown at Mach 0.77, which equates to about 450 miles an hour. Being able to fly high and fly fast allows this jet to cover a large amount of airspace. So when we're talking about hurricane flights, we actually fly in front of the storm and around the storm itself. The data that we're collecting in front of the storm helps us determine how that atmosphere is going to impact the track of the hurricane. So it's very important for the hurricane forecasters to get that information. Other missions we do are GravD. This is a mission where we have a very sensitive instrument on board that is actually measuring the Earth's geoid, and it's helping to update the vertical data, which is used in floodplain mapping. During those flights, it's completely different from a hurricane flight because we have to fly in 0 turbulent conditions. For those, we can't even change the power adjustment when we're flying lines. So we're just flying straight and level, trying to keep the plane as smooth as possible. This plane is built for that. We've got very sophisticated avionics. We've got 6 different display screens here, which aren't turned on right now, but it helps the pilots keep very good situational awareness as we fly. Also has autopilot and auto throttles. So a lot of times you could sit back and monitor what it's doing, but the NOAA pilots like to fly it ourselves. Thank you for joining me for our tour aboard NOAA's Gulfstream 4 Gonzo. Hope you enjoyed the other hurricane hunters, our P3s, Kermit and Miss Piggy.
Thank you, Commander Waddington, for the great tour of the NOAA G4. Now let's go over to Lieutenant Commander Kevin DeRamus to see if pigs really can fly.
I'm Lieutenant Commander Kevin DeRamus, a WP3D Orion pilot and safety officer here at the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center in Lakeland, Florida. Looking forward to giving you a tour of our facility today. Welcome aboard November 4-3 Romeo Foxtrot, more commonly known as Miss Piggy. We're going to walk up front and give you a tour of the cockpit. Welcome to the cockpit of Miss Piggy. This is a plane that was built in 1976. A lot of what you see in the cockpit is original to 1976. But a lot of it is also upgraded. So you can see we've got some upgraded engine instruments, some upgraded displays up here. These planes are maintained really, really well by an extremely talented group of men and women in our maintenance and engineering department. Just to give you kind of general walk through the crew complement up in the flight station is a pilot, a flight engineer, another pilot, and then we have call it our PI seater where the chief scientist can sit. Typical hurricane crew, we fly with 3 pilots, so there's 2 pilots flying, 1 pilot resting. We've got a rack in the back where you can take a little nap, even though napping in a hurricane sometimes isn't that easy. And we typically have 2 flight engineers as well. So again, 1 in the seat, 1 resting. A pretty interesting crew complement with the flight engineer. Nowadays, most planes don't have flight engineers, but they are a critical team member to this operation. Their kind of job is to basically monitor the health of the engines, and they're actually physically manipulating the power levers for us in the storm environment. So you've got 1 power lever for every engine, so you got engine 1, 2, 3, 4, that's from left to right. And in the hurricane environment, it's really, really important for us to maintain a set airspeed, and that particular airspeed is 210 knots indicated on our airspeed indicator. There's one here, there'll be one on the screen here, and then there's another one over there. So we're looking at all 3. Making sure we maintain 210 knots. So this is basically the gas pedal right here. More forward, more power, pull back a little bit slower. And then the way that we fly it is really interesting. So the pilot in the left seat is what we call the pilot flying, the one that's physically manipulating the controls. They've got rudder pedals at your feet, and then the stick left, right, up and down. The pilot flying in the hurricane environment, the job is to maintain wings level, fly a track over ground that's assigned to us by the flight director or airflight meteorologist, and maintaining as best we can altitude. So as we're flying that track at that altitude and wings level, maintaining that course over ground, the flight engineer is manipulating the power levers to maintain 210 knots, and the pilot in the right seat is basically monitoring the whole operation, backing up the pilot flying, and handling all the communications with the flight director and the science crew in the back of the aircraft. Now, if you can imagine, in a hurricane environment, you get a lot of updrafts, a lot of downdrafts, strong headwinds, crosswinds, tailwinds. It's a very dynamic environment to fly in. So we've had to fly the airplane a little bit differently. When we are going through, typically the eye wall is where we get the highest concentration of turbulence and updrafts and downdrafts. We have to manipulate the airplane to maintain that 210 knots. When we are max power, and the airplane is still slowing down, we can basically maneuver the airplane with a pitch down attitude, trading our altitude for airspeed. So the flight engineer will say, I've got max power. The guy in the right seat will say, we're still slowing down. So you take the stick and you push it forward a little bit, and you get a little bit of airspeed that way. Same thing in the reverse. If we are really fast and the power levers come to flight idle and our speed is still coming up, we'll take the stick and we'll pull it back a little bit. Again, trading that altitude for airspeed. Like I said, it's really important to maintain that 210 knots. If you go too fast, you can overstress the airplane. If you go too slow, you can stall the wing out, and then the plane will stop flying for a short amount of time. So it's very, very important that we maintain that airspeed. So very dynamic environment, requires a lot of communication, a lot of practice, a lot of utilizing what we call crew resources. Resource Management, or CRM. We are managing a large team. We have the flight station over here, which is pretty small, but we've got a whole complement of people in the back. Navigators, flight directors, visiting scientists, media, in-flight technicians, mechanics. Very, very interesting environment, but it's a lot of fun, and I fly with some of the best men and women in the world, and I think it's just one of the greatest jobs. And if you have any interest in ever flying for the NOAA Corps, being a pilot, you can look into what's called the NOAA Corps. I used to call this 7th smallest service, but now I guess we're the 8th after the Space Force. But go on our website, check out information about the NOAA Corps, and you can come fly with us someday.
This is a clip from a flight through Hurricane Dorian. As you can see, there's a stadium effect within the eye wall, and above is clear blue skies.
We've learned what the pilots do in the front of the aircraft and what it's like to operate the P3. Now let's talk about what goes on behind the cockpit. Let's talk with one of our flight directors, Ashley Lundry, about the NOAA P3.
Hi, I'm Ashley Lundry. I'm a meteorologist and I'm one of the flight directors that flies with the NOAA Hurricane Hunters. Right now I'm standing next to Miss Peggy. She is one of the P3s that flies right into the eye of a hurricane. So I have my degree in meteorology. I also have a master's degree in physical science. When I was little, I was really good at math and science. I loved math and science. I know a lot of people don't admit to that, but I also thought it would be really cool to be a meteorologist. I found out that there were people that flew into hurricanes, and that became my dream job. How cool is it to fly into a hurricane? I know a few people will think it's absolutely terrifying, but I think it's just an amazing opportunity. Let me go ahead and show you a couple of things about the plane. We have 3 radars. We have a nose radar, we have the lower fuselage radar, and we have the tail Doppler radar. So when we're flying, the nose radar is really the operational radar. It's the one that's keeping us safe. We can see right what is in front of us and make sure that we're not flying through anything that's too dangerous to fly through. The belly radar is kind of a combination of flight safety and then also research. So we are able to look at the big picture and also zoom in on the storm and use it with the nose radar to make sure we're flying through safe weather and that we don't need to go around something. But also after the storms, those radar files can be used for research. The third radar we have on the plane is the tail Doppler radar. It's on the tail of the plane, so it's not really helpful for safety of flight because we're not seeing anything on that radar until after we've already flown through it. But it's also a really useful radar operationally and for research. The tail Doppler radar points to the front and to the rear, and it's essentially painting a 3D picture of what the hurricane looks like, and that's being sent back, and the forecasters at the National Hurricane Center can get a better idea about what the storm's doing. That data also goes into the forecast models and helps improve the forecast accuracy on where a storm is going to go. Right now I'm standing in front of the Sfmr, that stepped frequency microwave radiometer, and yes, that will be a Jeopardy question later. The Sfmr is measuring the brightness temperature of the ocean's surface, and with algorithms it is able to take that brightness temperature and give us an estimate of what the surface wind speeds are. So that data is getting sent back to the National Hurricane Center and letting the forecast know as we're flying over the storm how strong the winds are on the surface. Let's go ahead and head to the plane so I can show you inside. This is where I sit on the plane. This is the flight director station. We do have a window, which is nice because we actually do look out the window a lot to see what the conditions look like on the surface. It tells us a lot about what the winds are and what the structure of the storm looks like. In front of me is where the pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineers sit, and then across from me is where the navigators sit. So it's really great being across from the navigator and so close to the pilots because there's just a lot of coordination that goes on during the plane, and even though we're talking on headset, it's nice to be able to look over at the navigator and ask questions as we're making decisions about where we're going to go next and how we're going to accomplish the mission. The thing that's unique about this is it's not just one person that makes or breaks the mission. It really truly is a team to accomplish everything. We can't fly into a hurricane without the pilots and the flight engineers flying the plane. We need the navigator to help make sure where we are and help with planning and getting us to the storm and from the storm. As a flight director, we're directing the flight. We're kind of like a liaison between the science team that's on the back of the plane and then the flight crew in the front of the plane, taking the objectives of the scientist and explaining how we're going to accomplish that to the pilots, which direction to fly, making sure that everything's safe to do based off what we're seeing on the radar, and then also communicating information that the pilots give us back to the science team. So there's a lot going on the flight. Often there's multiple objectives that we're trying to accomplish. Also, when the scientists want instruments released into the storms, such as the dropsondes or the AXBTs, which are buoys that can go into the ocean and they measure the depth and the temperature of the water, we're coordinating, okay, it's okay to drop these with the pilots, and then making sure that we're requesting our AVAPS team in the back of the plane to release the dropsondes exactly where the scientists want. So a lot of moving parts that are going on during the mission. So we fly both operational and research missions, and there's different types for both. With the operational missions, specifically during hurricane season, we can be tasked by the National Hurricane Center to fly investigative missions where we're flying low and there's really no storm that's developed yet, but the purpose of the mission is to see if there is circulation on the surface and if it's a closed system. We also, tasked by the National Hurricane Center, can fly fixed missions, and that's once a storm does have closed circulation. We're going out and we're hunting for the center of the storm. We're collecting data, the exact position of the storm, the winds, the max winds at flight level and at the surface, pressure, all sorts of meteorological information that we're putting into a message called the Vortex Data Message to send back to the forecasters at the National Hurricane Center. We're also coordinating releasing dropsondes into the storm, so that data can also go back to the forecasters and into the forecast models. We fly TDR missions, the tail Doppler radar, where it's scanning vertically to the front and to the back of the plane, and it's pretty much painting a three-dimensional picture of what the storm looks like. And that data is also going into forecast models, so it's very useful for forecasting where the storm's going and then just understanding what exactly is going on within the storm. Now, aside from the operational missions during hurricane season, we also fly various research missions where we have different scientists on the plane that have different projects they're working on and different instruments, and each of those are unique with their own goals. Although we are called the Hurricane Hunters, we do a lot of other missions aside from flying into hurricanes. We also fly into winter storms, we fly our chemistry missions, we fly even next to supercells and tornadoes. In fact, during severe weather season, sometimes we go to the Midwest and we'll fly along next to supercells or squall lines, which is a pretty remarkable experience as a meteorologist. We're flying sometimes about 10 miles off of a supercell that has a tornado on the ground. So really interesting research mission.
Hi, my name is Nick Underwood. I'm an aerospace engineer with the Noaa Hurricane Hunters, and my job on this aircraft is to launch expendables and operate our airborne vertical atmospheric profiling system. This station in front of me has all of the computers, data recorders, and launch controls that allow me to deploy instruments like this all throughout hurricanes. This instrument is a GPS dropsonde. Think of this like a reverse weather balloon. So as we're flying along through the storm, my job is to sync these up with the computer system, launch them out of the tube here. Once they leave the aircraft, a parachute deploys, and as they float down, this collects temperature, pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction data. A radio transmitter inside sends all of that data back to this station here in real time where I can see it coming in. And once these splash in the ocean, we send that data off to the National Hurricane Center where they can incorporate that data into their predictive models of where the storms are going to go and how strong they're going to be when they get there. Over a typical mission flight, we'll launch between 20 and 30 of these, in addition to some other instruments as well. So in addition to two internal tubes that allow us to launch dropsondes as well as other instruments, there are 22 external tubes that we can load up before we take off for a mission flight that allow us to launch larger instruments to collect even more data. This particular aircraft has been flying through hurricanes and flying a number of atmospheric science missions since 1977 in collaboration with a bunch of international partners. Thanks for joining me in this crash course on one of the primary ways that we collect data, and enjoy the rest of your tour.
We've talked about how the scientific data is gathered on board the aircraft, but now we also need to talk about NOAA's response. So NOAA provides response with our King Air. We were able to allocate resources to the damaged areas by evaluating the coastline, helping organizations like FEMA and the U.S. military to provide aid to those areas.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colin Conley from Ellicott City, Maryland. I commissioned out of the Naval Academy in 2009 with a degree in oceanography. I flew the P-3 Orion for the Navy for 10 years and transitioned to the NOAA Corps in October 2019. Here at NOAA, I'm an aviation safety officer and I fly the Beechcraft King Air. Come on back, let's have a look inside. So here we are in the back of the King Air. The first thing you're going to notice are these two big cameras right here. We have both an oblique and a nadir camera, which allow us to perform our primary mission sets. We take both pre and post event imagery. Pre-event imagery occurs prior to hurricane season every year. We fly the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, and around the U.S. territories in the Caribbean and collect imagery of the coastline. This imagery will serve as a baseline or a standard for comparison in case a hurricane or tropical storm rolls through. And then our post-event imagery, also known as emergency response imagery, will be collected, and then we can make comparisons to see what's changed. This imagery is all publicly available online. That about covers our primary mission sets. We can head up to the cockpit. Welcome to the cockpit. We typically fly these missions with 3 people on board. We have a pilot in either seat up front and a sensor operator who's controlling the camera in the back. Factors that affect this mission are sun angle and tide windows. The tide windows are important because how high the water is will affect the imagery that we're getting along the coastline, and sun angle is important because you don't want long shadows cast when you're trying to collect imagery of the coastline. The left-hand pilot is flying off of an iPad that's showing them where to fly, so crew resource management is especially important here because the right side pilot is going to be monitoring your airspace, your traffic, making all their radio calls, setting the nav aids, that sort of thing. So you want to make sure everyone's working in unison to keep the aircraft safe at all times. We typically fly around 5,500 feet, lower if needed. We can't have any clouds below us, which is a pretty stringent requirement, but makes sense because the clouds will show up in all of the imagery. So that's often a limiting factor for us. But that's the basic gist of how we fly our coastal mapping missions. Thanks for joining me today for a tour of NOAA's Beechcraft King Air. Enjoy the rest of your tour of the Aircraft Operations Center.
Maintaining our aircraft is a full-time job. We're constantly trying to maintain our aircraft and make sure that we have them in the best possible condition because some of the flights that we have are very extreme. Let's go over and meet one of our mechanics right now.
Good afternoon, my name is Peter Boisenwald. I'm a light aircraft technician with NOAA AOC. I'm originally a New England native and I've been with NOAA for a few years now. I'm currently working, doing maintenance on our de Havilland Twin Otter, November 5-6 Romeo Foxtrot, and preparing the aircraft for our Alaska season. We're currently configuring November 5-6 Romeo Foxtrot for our Alaska season. Usually that consists of some marine mammal surveys and some Arctic missions up in the north. We always do some preparing maintenance, go through items that we usually are hard to service in the field and are easier to comply with down here at our home base. Engine cowlings are down, we're looking everything over real good. Obviously we don't want any oil leaks or any issues. Inside of the interior we usually will configure, we'll try to pack all of our mission equipment and bring it up in one stage up to Anchorage, Alaska. And right now we're currently installing our auxiliary fuel tank, which gives us extra endurance and range. Like Lieutenant McGinn said, the Twin Otter is easily configurable like a Lego set. We have a 170 gallon aux fuel tank we're currently installing. Gives us approximately a 3-hour range, helps us with some longer missions. We usually use seat tracks,
and some other mounting options to install our cabin interior, science equipment, etc. Currently we have some panels open. We're doing some flap control components, doing a visual inspection and checking everything out. We really want to make sure these aircraft are safe, as we actually fly with the aircraft during science missions in Alaska. So it's pretty important for us and the pilots and crew and safety.
Thank you very much for spending some time with me on our Noaa de Havilland Twin Otter. Hope to see you in the Arctic sometime and continue your tour with Noaa AOC.
From all of us here at the Noaa Aircraft Operations Center, thank you for joining us for a virtual tour. Remember to follow us on our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also follow us at our website.
3, 2, 1, here we go.
I'm Commander Rebecca Waddington, the current Acting Chief of the Operations Branch at NOAA's Aircraft Operations Center. I'm also an aircraft commando.
This is where 3, 2, 1.
I wonder if this is in the shot. Probably is, knowing me.
Still getting used to this thing. I'm trying to get it to lock on to you.
Trying to lock on him?
Woo, woo, woo! Where's she going? Where's she going? I tripped.
The Sfmr, that is right here. God.
2, 1. I'm Lieutenant Commander Kevin Doremus. I'm a WP-3D Orion pilot and AOC.
And it has special equipment which help us determine, oh, I gotta start this over. This was terrible. Why did you tell me this was terrible? That was terrible.
And my job on this aircraft is to launch expendables and operate our airborne, crap.
Founding father without a father. So maintaining our aircraft is extremely important.
East Coast, the Gulf Coast. Don't look at me like that.
Pacific, but also doing Emmas every time you try to go look at a seal.
And
Woo! Hang on, we're gonna redo it. Okay. All right.
Facility you see beside me, behind me, over there, on the other side, over my shoulder. The big blue art mark.
and when we're in that, that was terrible.
We'll throw in a little verbiage to please the nerds.
I'm dying.
Come on back.